going on, everybody? It's Matt Sarmiento from Sarmiento Motorsports, here with you again for another awesome video. Check out some cool things we can do to your machine. Really big topic right now is maintenance. So I know race season is going on for a lot of people. This is a good time in between rounds. Check your machine over. You might be surprised what you could find. Don't neglect the machine, for sure. The machine is what keeps you going, as pictured here with team rider Andrea Rodriguez, and then Honduras ripping on her YLZ. Gotta keep that machine, up to par. If it's not, it will not have that kind of performance, for sure. And the performance is everything, and also to your safety as well. So in between our last rounds, I was a little shy on time. I did notice I had a bent back rear brake rotor. So after my last rounds, obviously I got on, making sure I had parts ordered and ready to go. So I'm going to show you, a couple things. Hopefully this can help, because sometimes that the bolts for the rear rotor could be really, really tough sometimes to try and get them off without stripping them. So to do it as easy as possible without having to, completely tear your whole machine out, So we have here a new set of EBC rear brake pads. If you like these, they work pretty good. They're not too loud either. They don't make that harmonic sound. The Tusk Typhoon Rear Brake Rotor. I'm not gonna lie, I do go through a lot of brake rotors, so the rear ones. Don't get me wrong, the OEM one actually is probably my favorite, but literally I've bent quite a few rotors, and this one has really seemed to do really well for me. For the most part, works good. If you bend it, it's not that big of a deal, but it does stop really good. So I'd say it's right there with the OEM performance, or maybe a hair bit better. Also, too, got a few of these guys while I got the tire off. Some of these from Explicit Motorsports. So these Pro Ballistics mud plugs, and they actually go on the inside of the back tires. So you have your mud plugs on the outside. Well, these are for the inside. It helps block a lot of the stuff's going in. Also, to a machine maintenance. I also noticed a couple other things that I just found on the machine as well. Well, this is from a previous round. Rounds, some of my lug nuts. I actually found two of my front lug nuts, and these are aluminum. Actually got a crack in them. So there is actually a crack rolling up on that lug nut. Let's see, maybe get a little bit better camera. Hopefully a good camera focus. There is a crack in that guy, literally. So now I found one on each, and the easy way you could tell that is if there's a little bit of a silvering or like shavings or anything like that coming around your wheels. Check all your wheel lug nuts. You never know. So yeah, it happens. So maybe I had one time I landed on that front wheel too hard, this could have been from an old accident from before too. Who knows? And it's just after time it develops. So don't ever take for granted checking the things in your machine. As I was actually inspecting my machine, now going to the next round, I actually did find that my swing arm bushings are starting to, bearings and bushings are starting to not be so healthy on it. So I had to do some emergency swing arm bushings. So it happens, so, it is what it is. So, it's not terrible, but we don't want to neglect it. So got those ordered. So we should have those here in time. So we should have plenty of time to actually make sure our machine's fresh, strong, ready to go racing. And that's how you avoid the problems, so you got to be on top of it, on top of your machine maintenance. So, and starting with brakes, that's a fantastic thing. Even tire pressure, check your tires. How do your tires look? Are they starting to, the lugs are starting to get pulled off of them, or are they starting to get a little dry, or the lugs are missing, or there's damage to your tires, to chain, all that good stuff. So, but we're gonna get right into it. We got our machine up on the on our scissor stand and get some better camera shots. So we're gonna get right to it by taking off our right rear tire and then going from there. All right. So we're gonna use a flathead screwdriver, pop off our mud plug, 14 millimeter, an extension. Use the impact gun. Now, yes, my setup on my race machine is a little different, but I definitely know the size as well for the stock, and also to a different setup. What we have here is we have some Lone Star billet aluminum hubs on here. Our with our pin here. I'm gonna pull the pin, a 27 millimeter. And back out. If this was the stock hub with a stock castle nut, it is a 22 millimeter. And with a cotter pin, you would bend the cotter pin out or cut it, remove it, take a 22 millimeter socket with an impact gun and remove it. So same thing, we're gonna remove the component. Just have some pliers, pull the pin. I usually use my mud cap to put all my hardware and stuff in it. 27 millimeter socket, 1/2 inch impact gun. Strong little guy there. A lot lighter to take out. Obviously my axle's adjustable, so I just have to take the spacers out. Don't forget to reorientate your spacers to what you are using it. So for mine, that is the orientation for my Dominator axle. Take the hub out, right? And remove the spacers. What we're trying to do is we're trying to work our way over here. And we did have a rush as far as on our last race. I mean, we washed the machine there at the track, you know, from the camper, so it wasn't as bad. So it's not perfect, but you know, it definitely does the job. But I mean, we didn't have a chance to detail it, so we're going to our next round. And with the Florida summer, it's definitely doing its thing. And I'll show you some of the signs of what a bent brake rotor starts to do. All right, so let's get a few more tools and keep on rolling. Okay, so we're going to remove the brake caliper. All right, so the two 14 millimeter bolts on the back. These are our 14 millimeter socket. I'm gonna go with the cordless electric snap-on guy there. Speed the process up, obviously break it loose first by hand. That one's pretty. You would like to get yourself a 5 millimeter either T-handle, Allen key of some sort. Do it the smart way. Instead of fighting, don't take the bolts all the way out. Always just put one in there, the top one. You definitely want to loosen those guys. Well, we might have to get ourselves a sharper Allen. That one is a little rounded. Not gonna deny that. It has been around the block many a time, so this one's probably got to go back to Snap-on for warranty. So yeah, I already know what's about to happen. So I'm gonna get another Allen to loosen that guy. On my lock nut, mine is a billet aluminum one, a Lone Star one. So that you also use the 5 millimeter Allen on that. Now, if you have a stock one, which works great, this is the honest truth. Don't go, oh, Matt's got one, I'm gonna go get one. If you have a stock setup, honest to God truth, this lock nut or anti-fade nut may not be very good to use for the stock application. So this is the stock axle nut with the has the 4 bolts that go and pinch into the axle. So if your carrier is stock or you have a stockish style carrier, so I'm going to explain that. If you have all that stuff, I would stick with this nut. And the reason being is that this nut, since it's metal, you could crank down on it. This one being aluminum, you can't. The reason I'm using this one is because my carrier, I have a tapered carrier, right? So the bearings are tapered in it. So there's no sleeve in the middle. So if you have a twin row carrier, like factory, what they come in factory, they work good. So you have to use this. If you use this guy, you'll never be able to tighten it. This is supposed to be 180 foot-pounds of torque from the factory. Just between us, I never put them that tight. I always do like about 80 to 100. That is more than tight enough. I've never had one come loose. I mean, not unless I was having a problem with the threads or something like that on the axle part of it. And the reason why it has to be so tight versus this, because again, these are tapered bearings, so there is no sleeve inside. Okay, So if you over tighten this, you're gonna destroy the bearings. On the other system, there's bearings on each side and the sleeve is in the middle. So you actually have to tighten it in order to get the right preload to it. That's the way that system works. Me personally, I'm not saying the factory one isn't good. It is good. This is a factory sleeve. The factory sleeve is aluminum. So after it gets tightened a lot and it gets moved, you ride and whatnot, if you have to keep on tightening that nut, I guarantee that sleeve is crushing. Okay? The Lone Star carrier, I've used it many times. This is the first time I was giving this one a try. Just wanted to give it a shot just because. And it's been working well as long as you know how to adjust it right. If you don't know, I would almost suggest just sticking with the twin row system. But the Lone Star carrier is steel. So the steel one, you could crank on it, and it is not going to, get smashed. It's not going to wear out as fast, and it's not going to be destroyed as easily. So, and it makes sense. This is very strong, but over the stress of the machine, it actually does start to crush. You can actually start to crush this sleeve. This one is, it's not impossible, but it's very, very hard. It could take a lot more abuse. It could take a whooping like crazy. And I've usually used the Lone Star carrier 9 out of 10. I just want to try the RPM one this time around. So just want to give that a try, see what was up, and go with that. So as you can see, I didn't have to fight my my axle nut because, again, the system. So I don't want you guys to be like, man, well, yours is looser than loose. That's just because of the system. You have a stock one, you will need a 46 millimeter axle wrench. And what I recommend is a breaker bar, but probably past the camera, but at least like a 3-foot breaker bar. Put it in there. Once you loosen the 4 nuts, with the tires on the ground, if you don't have any help, if you have help, if somebody can hold the rear brake for you, that'd be even better to break that guy loose. And definitely make shoe with some penetrating oil. I have seen them be on there pretty tight. I've usually I've had good fortune with them, but I've had customers, ones come in and they were rougher than rough. So, it happens. So that's why I usually don't put them that tight. Once you're at 80 to 100 foot-pounds, I've never really seen them go too much more ham. If somebody requests, to make sure it's really tight, like 120. But that 180, dude, that's really, really stressing that thing. So anyways, once you get it loose, this is all the same. So literally take the nut off, take your washer off. Well, for now, we'll just get our brake off. I'll do something to get that other guy loose, because you obviously got to loosen the pins. That's how you get the brakes out, the brake pads. But you can remove the caliper with you can't remove it with the 2 big 14 millimeter bolts off. Okay. So this guy now is pretty easy to get off. I would recommend usually taking this off. If you have the other system and it's not coming off, then I totally get it. Try to get an impact gun in there. But it's very hard to get an impact gun in there and to hold it just right so you can see the impact gun it'd be very hard to get that thing straight in there and to get a good hit at those bolts. Those bolts are on there really, really hard. So I promise you that. So now we got our hub off with the brake rotor. We'll take it over to the bench. We'll clean up some of the sand and some of that's behind it. It's well greased. I can see the grease definitely hanging out from it. So that's fantastic. I'm glad. So our system is working the way it's supposed to. We'll take it, like I said, over to the bench, and I'll show you a little easier. I have a better camera shot what this rotor looks like. So we got some of our tools here. What I did do is I took a wire brush and brushed around to get the dirt and mud and stuff off of it. This is a 6 millimeter Allen key for 1/2 inch. The reason I'm saying you want to use something that big is because sometimes these guys can be on there pretty hard. But as you can see, if the axle is on there, that'd be really hard to get an impact gun on there straight. So it's just not worth the headache. I've actually had people bring these in because they stripped all the nuts out of it, all the bolts out of it. They said, dude, can you get this thing off? I was like, yeah, man, no problem, and you got to do it the very extra hard way. So I usually just, like I said, take the hub off with the rotor, just make it easy. Anyway, so put your socket on there, get yourself a small hammer, give it a tap. Vibrations do help loosen it. Hold that rotor firmly. And yeah, they're pretty tight. I would recommend using an impact gun. This is a 12-volt, 1/2-inch DeWalt, or you could use a 3/8 with an adapter, Milwaukee mid-torque impact gun. That works really good as well. We're gonna repeat. 450 foot-pounds. The Milwaukee 18-volt 3/8 mid-torque is about 600 foot-pounds of torque, so they have plenty. So you want that quick snap so you don't strip the bolts. If you're sitting there hammering on it, it strips the bolts every time. We might have to switch to the Milwaukee. All right, well, you do get those ones just like that too. Okay, give it a couple taps. Get the Milwaukee out. Milwaukee is a 3/8 drive. We're gonna use a adapter on it. We'll see. Hold firmly, reverse. There you go. It's a snap power. So if it doesn't like get that quick snap to it, you definitely want to stop and go to something bigger. If you're trying to do it by hand, oh man, you're a brave man or woman. Ask Jesus to take the wheel, seriously, something. There you go. So quick snap power. The tools do make the difference. So this is one I would say use some power tools, and if you don't have them, well, maybe you might have to take this one to the shop then, possibly. I mean, or if not, if you're a little more patient, maybe spray them with some lube, something, a couple of days before, anything. I mean, but I've been racing this thing. It's hit the mud, it's hit water. Like I said, our last race was a mud race, so I mean, and this thing got pressure washed. You can see what's coming off this guy. So he's been through some stuff. So now looking at our brake rotor, and it's sometimes a little hard to get a good lighting with it, but there's areas of the brake rotor you can see are like blue, and there's areas that are not. That right there is a significant sign of this rotor is warped. So this is the spot that's warped more this way, and then the other side is doing the opposite. Right? See how it's clear again? It starts to get warped, then clear, then warped again. So sometimes a little hard. Sometimes you gotta change his light angle, but hopefully that's coming out well on the camera. But yeah, so that is a warped brake rotor. So, and it's not bad, it's not terrible. I mean, my brake pads aren't eating away, but it does miswear your brake pads, so it actually starts to dish your brake pads. So even though my brake pads look good, I'm still gonna change them out for the obvious reasons for good stopping power. But yeah, when that thing is dragging, you could lose quite a bit of pull power. It makes a huge difference. So, check your brakes, especially rear rotor. It does happen. They do get bent. They're very hard to bend back. I mean, you can tweak them close. I mean, I've seen them bent so bad, a machine barely rolls. So if you're in that predicament, you got to tweak it back. Do what you got to do. But definitely when you can, change that joker out. So yeah, we'll put this hurt animal away. Make sure all your contact areas are clean. There's no dirt, there's no grime in there. If you got to take a wire brush to it, take a wire brush to it. Clean it up. Make sure there's nothing there obstructing the when the new rotor goes on. Just a little quick hit with a wire brush makes all the difference. And obviously you do want to clean the inside of this guy. There's no way around it. You always get a little dirt in there, so you got to clean that thing. You don't want dirt inside your threads, because it actually was pretty clear, so I got to give it that. Some of that. Yeah, this thing took a pounding on that last race. So, but I mean, that is racing. So now those guys this past weekend that raced at Aonia Pass, oh my gosh, for ATV Nationals, man, now that was terrible. I think I would have just sat in the camper and watched that one. So there we go. What a difference. Okay, we have ourselves a nice clean area there. Area is clean. Bust ourselves out. Quick razor knife. And yes, it is a snap-on razor knife. It actually is not that expensive, just in case anybody's wondering. I mean, I got a good tool, guys. It was like 35 bucks. Auto loading knife. With me, I gotta be careful, not I end up chopping myself up. Okay. So we got our brake rotor out. On some machines, check to see if the holes, it's a one-way deal, of course. And I mean, obviously, I mean, you can look at the rotor and you can actually see that's actually a directional rotor. So as it's turning, the slots, they'll be going with the speed of the machine. If you go the other way, yes, it would be more aggressive, but then it'd eat the brake pads faster. So there is direction to them. So we're gonna go this route. We're going to give a small drop of blue Loctite. Do not need to go crazy on it because they do get really tight. If those bolts are starting to get rounded, do yourself a favor, put new bolts on there. You will suffer for it the next time. Blue Loctite. If you only have red, I'm telling you, like, use only like a half a drop of red if that's what you got, because you will you will regret it. A little bit of blue, 1 or 2 drops. Blue is not gonna kill it. Just gonna ensure nothing's gonna come loose. And remember, there's a collar on this thing, so the rotor is actually gonna ride on that collar. So when you go to put this thing on, make sure it's seated well. Because if you're trying to force it and the bolt's not going down, well, it's getting stuck on the collar. And it's not gonna like it. So just a little bit. So I recommend at least putting 2 down by hand. Or if you go really slow with your impact gun, so you can see this one already went in on the collar. Now you can look, it's still loose. So if you go ahead and hit that thing with the impact gun, it's gonna get stuck on the collar on this one. And that bolt's never gonna go down. Speaking of, that way you get it centered. And it does make a difference. If that thing is wobbling on there, well, it throws everything off balance. So we're not gonna use the Milwaukee. We don't need to put it on that tight. We'll go back to our D-wall, our 12 volt. Does not take a crazy amount. It's a couple hits. I promise you that is more than enough. And thankfully these bolts are still really, really sharp. They do not want to let go. If you're unsure, like, you know, hey, you know, are you sure it's not going to back off or anything like that? I mean, come on. You know, that didn't seem like a lot. Well, here's a little tech tip. Take yourself a paint marker. And just give a little hit of paint. So once you go out for a practice or two, you can check your bolts, make sure none of them are coming loose. Never hurts to do. And it don't cost an arm and a leg. Get this at Home Depot, some liquid paint, the paint pen. I use it all the time. I mean, hey, whatever works. Now, all we gotta do is, and I would recommend doing this over our trash can. Take a rag, we're gonna clean the inside of this guy up, slap a little bit of new grease on there, and slide it all back together. All right, so as you see, we had to mount the brake caliper back on temporarily. The lower pin was not cooperating, and it definitely stripped. There's no way around that, so I've got to get a new one of those, of course. Will it be here in time for the weekend? I don't know, but we will try. We have really good people there at Rocky Mountain, so I cannot thank them enough for everything to do. And in fact, it was just safer just to remount the brake caliper back on the holder. I'm gonna take the bolts off right quick. And that is not a Torx bit, just in case you're wondering. That is something very unique of an extractor. So, I mean, it works every time, but it is what it is. Okay, so brakes are not super hard, thankfully, and mine are not terrible. What you do want to do before you take them off, get a flathead screwdriver. Stick the flathead screwdriver in between the pads. And all you gotta do is give it a twist. And what you're doing is you're actually pushing the piston back And now you're gonna have room for when the new brake pads are in. Obviously the new ones are gonna be thicker. There we go. And you literally just feel it open up. I mean, my brake pads are not terrible, but I mean, they are not perfect either. So you actually do gotta put a little like downwards pressure, like so squeeze it with your finger in order to finish getting the pins out. So now there's the big controversy. Do you grease the pins? Do you not grease the pins? I mean, I try not to over grease them. Definitely want to take a wire brush and clean them, that is for sure. The thing is, so if you grease them, yes, they slide better. However, here in Florida where I live, the moment you grease them, sand hits them. When sand hits them, sand is an abrasive and it will stop those jokers in their tracks. So I really do not try to grease these hard. I definitely try to clean them and give them a light. And when I mean a light coat of grease, I mean, I'm talking about just barely just hit it with a brush with grease on it. That way, if they start getting pitted and stuff like that, which these are not, and I've replaced brakes on this machine, many a times, but hey, that's what stops me and keeps me on the track, right? So, that is important. So clean them up, set it off to the side. Same with the next one. Again, squeeze. There you go, then the pin comes out. Just a light grease or anything. I know it's not going to stay on there long, but you don't want to be attracting every grain of sand on the track, and then your brakes will never work. So you're getting on the brakes, and that's when you've heard of sometimes or maybe you have heard of this or not heard of it, like somebody's brake caliper getting stuck or something like that. Well, 9 times out of 10, either A, they never cleaned it with a wire brush like this. I mean, you can see the stuff coming off on my gloves. Or B, they just slathered on a ton of grease on there, and the grease literally, I mean, I'm talking about they just slathered that thing on, just nasty, put it on there. And the grease, well, every speck of dirt, and especially sand, since it's grainy, obviously, will jump right on those guys, and it will lock those things up. It will lock up those slide pins. That is a guarantee on that. There is no way around that. So anyways, then you wiggle these guys on out, check all your hardware. My guy here needs to be tightened up a little bit. That's okay, he's good right there. Piece of hardware there. We get our new brake pads out. I'll show you up close. But yeah, I mean, they got the thickness to them, but what I was saying about them getting miswore. So here's your new brake pad. Get nice and close. Sorry about that. Yes. Oh, I'll move this out of the way. Okay, there we go. New brake pad, right? Beautiful, looks great. Here's your old brake pad. What you could see is that because that rotor was warped, that the rotor was actually contacting the pad and overheating it. So now this pad, honestly, since it's been overheated, it really is no good. Can you throw it on there and use it? Yes, it's gonna stop. Will it perform the way it's supposed to? It will not, I guarantee that. This pad has been overheated, this thing has been overworked, and it's not healthy. Even though it's not like completely smoked or anything like that. It's like about halfway. I mean, but I mean, let's see if we get a better shot. Yeah, you can see it's like halfway. It's compared to the new pad. But when it's been overheated and messed up, it'll never break the same. It'll never have the same stopping performance, because now this material here is harder and this one's softer than you have. And then you can see actually on the bottom that it was also messed up as well. So most likely the one side of the rotor, the top of it was bent out, and then on the complete opposite, because what it does is it does a warp effect. The opposite with the inside was messed up. So, and then you get it's hitting it unevenly, and that's bad, really bad. And then the other pad, and this might be hard to see on camera, it's not as bad, but you could see that it was getting overworked, top of it. So only like 50% or less of this brake pads were being used correctly because of a bent rotor. So we definitely don't want to run these things. They're no good. Yeah, they got some meat on them, but honestly, is it really worth it? No. If we're in a pinch, totally different. If we're at the track, we gotta like make this thing fly. Okay, totally different. You know, we will do what we gotta do. But we're here, we got time. We're gonna do it right. You know, new brake pads, new brake rotor. That's it. So I'm gonna get a little bit of grease those pins, and get the brake pads back in. All right. So I think it's usually easier to just hold the brake caliper upright. And this, I know this is tough to see, but part of this hardware, some spring loaded like guys here. You definitely want to take a screwdriver, and if there's any obstruction, scrape it out of the way. So that's part of the hardware. And also the other part of the hardware is here. This little stainless steel plate. You want to make sure that's there as well. So if not, it will really eat that caliper. Believe me, if you grease some things, it will make life 10,000 times worse. Like if you grease them excessively, because all the dirt will just, and it just goes in there like a magnet. It's bad. It's really bad. A little bit on the pins, maybe tops, but cleaning them for sure, and also scraping anything off the hardware there is a must. I mean, when I say a little bit, I mean I'm talking about I'm just barely getting a little bit on there, and I'm going to wipe the rest with my finger. Like I'm talking about, it's barely, this thing barely even has a coat of grease on there, because you do not want the thing to be the next magnet of attraction for the bad stuff that you do not want in there. So here, outer pad. So I forget, rear brakes, the pads are the same. The front ones, there's a difference. The inboard pad and the outboard pad are different, so you have to pay attention to that when you do front brakes. But rear brakes, both pads are the same. The OEM one, they have like a little, it's like a little noise dampener shield thing that goes on there. That thing got threw out forever ago. I promise you, it don't stay on for very long. I mean, it works, but by the time you go to change pads on the OEM one, they're so distorted and messed up. It's like, they're done. So you do got to give it a squeeze, right? Because they're spring, again, like I said, that little part in there spring loaded. Okay, our bit is not going to come out yet. I still need that. Put a little bit of grease on my next pin. I mean, a little bit of grease, just a little touch. Just that's it, a little itty bitty touch, and just take your finger and just put the rest on. Do not pack that thing full of grease. You are not greasing a semi truck. Promise you. You do not need to bust out the air greaser, grease gun, none of that stuff. Just a little bit of grease on your finger. A little grease on your finger never hurt. Do not tighten these guys too tight. As you see, they tighten themselves pretty much. So they just need to be snug. Doesn't hurt to put a little bit of Loctite. I just do not put it no more because of this happening. I just put them on snug, and that is it. I'm gonna have to run this one just for right now. I don't know if I'll have my my next pin in time. It's not gonna go anywhere, but I'm definitely not gonna put it on tight, that's for sure. That is what you do, you know, last minute resort thing, you know, so I don't know if I'll have that in time. Make sure before you put your caliper over the rotor that the pads are spread apart. So that's why we did that step with the old pads. You really don't want to, you know, jam a screwdriver in there and start messing up your brand new pads, because it actually does dent them and mess them up. So because we are going to be doing a swing arm, just for, you know, showing the idea of how this works, all this goodness. Bust out a shop rag. Make sure your axle is clean, your threads are clean. Make sure all your stuff's clean on there. I already took a moment there to clean the around the carrier. There is a seal here, and this ring, this metal sleeve has to be in there. If that metal sleeve is not in there, everything that is on the track will end up inside there, and it will destroy that carrier. So make sure all those things are good. This is a good time also too You know, you could check, you know, your axle, your seals, and stuff like that. Obviously, you can't check it for preload because obviously it's loose. So, but one way to check for preload is when it's on a stand, or at least with a jack stand at the back of it. You can actually move your axle, or if you're standing on it, somebody watching behind, you could actually put, you know, your feet as far as you can on your pegs and rock the machine side to side, and then you can see if your carrier is, if you have a bad bearing or anything like that. Okay, our surfaces there are clean. Actually, smidge of grease. You do want some grease on the splines. Some fresh grease. Some medium grease. Works well. And obviously it was working great because we had a mud race and there wasn't a single drop of water or mud in that system. On the stock axle, before I forget to point out, it does have seals in there. This axle doesn't have that, so, and it seems to work just fine, so, and we're gonna go with that. And that would be backwards. Pay attention. This side in. There you go. Simple as that. We put our washer on. And then our locking nut. It's a good time then to easily put on our bolts there. Start them by hand and you torque those down. Remember, for whatever you do, don't forget to pump the brakes. And on your first ride, try to brake easy to break them in. Now I gotta get my bit out. If it'll come out. I have to bust out the vice grips. Oh yeah, that's in there. That is a extremely strong little bit for extraction. So there's sometimes when you do need some specialty tools. Hopefully you don't get to that point, like what I just did. Well, that's gonna need some vice grips for sure. Because by finger power, I don't have enough. All right, so we're gonna stop right there. So we'll at least show you a general idea of, you know, rear brake pad and rotor. You would finish by obviously torquing the axle nut down, maybe, or you might want to wait for like the last step, but get your hub back on, the nut, torque it down accordingly, and obviously line up the slot there for the hole right there for the castle nut, so you put another cotter pin, because that is part of tech inspection and any race, so you have to have cotter pins on all four, or if you have a KTM, I believe it's supposed to have a locking nut. But I'm more of a cotter pin guy. I mean, because you never know, you have to have cotter pins on all four of your wheels for tech inspection. Put a new one of those, and then when you go to tighten this guy, and I wasn't even joking, literally the rear axle ring nut is 250 Newton meters, or we could equate that to good old American 181 foot-pounds of torque. That is a lot. So honestly, whenever I've used like 80 to 100 foot-pounds of torque, I really never had a problem with that. That is very, very tight. Normally the wrench is about to jump right around 160. It's pretty scary. So thinking about my $500 torque wrench hitting my, well, you know, exhaust is just as much. So actually, no, my torque wrench is a little more than that. Excuse me. So yeah, thinking about my torque wrench hitting the exhaust and cracking my carbon fiber tip exhaust, you know, makes me cringe a little bit. So definitely be careful when you do that. You know, do it and make sure you're try to stay from your exhaust, because you are pulling up on that, and it's a lot. It's a lot of torque. So like I said, 80 to 100. I mean, you could click that off, no problem. It's nothing crazy. Even if you want to do 120, but like around 160, between that 40 to 160, the wrench is about to like jump off, or the nut's about to strip. One of the two. So it's tight. Even though I know that's what they say, I wouldn't recommend it personally. So you never heard that from me. Anyways, I hope that helps out. So if you have to do some rear brake pads and rotors, I hope that helps give you some brake knowledge as well too. And the same applies for the fronts, you know. And maybe later we'll go ahead and also do some fronts. But we're gonna keep on going as soon as we get our parts in, which we should have in the next day or so, to do our swing arm, and we'll show you the rest of that. Getting the swing arm out of the machine, pressing new bushings in, putting it back in, and then finishing the rest of this and make sure this guy's ready to go racing. We got a lot this weekend coming up, and we're gonna have back-to-back races, so we cannot be down on our race machine. So anyways, thanks for watching as always, everybody. Everybody be safe. Have any questions, comment below. Please like and share. Thank you.